Hello everybody and welcome back to KXP, Kerbal Exploration Program. And in today our sights are set back on MINTZ, but this time we are going to land a Kerbal, not just one Kerbal, but 4 of them on the surface of MINTZ. Today we are building the most advanced rover that we have ever done on this channel in any of our series, so I'm very excited. It is, however, a long episode, so later there will be a skip ahead timestamp for you, but first let's just do some of the preliminary things, such as grab the contract for setting up a network around MINTZ. We're also going to grab a MINTZ space station contract and science status from Space Around the Mun. That's going to be easy enough. All we have to do is a flyby for that, and there we go. We're going to warp to sunrise. We don't necessarily need to, but it's a little easier to see. And I want to spend some of our money. As you can see here, we've got tons of science and even more money. We've got 1 million, almost 2 million there. So let's check about upgrading our buildings. First thing I definitely want to do is upgrade the launch pad because we're going to be making heavier rockets at that point, and so we're going to need to have an unlimited tonnage available for that. Mission control and tracking station are already upgraded. Research and development, I ended up spending too much money, so I wasn't able to. I could have upgraded that at the beginning, but we're not at the point where we need to, so there's no point in spending all of our money. So the science that I'm going to end up locking, I'm just going to focus here on the screen. So the things that we get is precision engineering for the communications abilities. We're going to grab scanning tech for the Exploration Rover System by ASET. The mod is in the description below, but also we have some extra science that can be utilized for that. That rover is actually going to be the focus of our episode today. So we also unlock quite heavy rocketry for the engines and the SRBs. We're going to unlock advanced fuel system for some bigger tanks, which is good. Advanced flight control for the RCS. We're going to go ahead and unlock the command module so we can start sending Kerbals up. Advanced electronics, because who doesn't like better batteries and solar panels? And then that also leads into electronics, which gives us much better communication dishes. And we're going to pick up subsonic flight and its partner, the wings number 4, so we can start working with a little bit better planes. And we're going to unlock the structures large because it was simply just one science. So go ahead, if you don't care about the building sequence, just want to get to the launch, go ahead and skip to that timestamp ahead, and I will see you there. So anyways, here we are with the Exploration Rover System, or now I'm going to just call it the ERS, and that is the cabin. It is made by the same people that did the ASET system, I believe. It just includes ASET in its title. So it is a highly advanced IVA capable rover, so that is why we are choosing it for today's mission. So we're gonna first give it an extra cabin so we can hold even more Kerbals than its standard, and then we're gonna focus on this cargo bay aspect right here. So we got a deployable bay on both sides. I play around with getting rid of that crew capsule, but I will always keep it, so don't have to worry about that. But yeah, so here we are. We can open the bays and then put some stuff in there. Science experiments, tinier rovers, anything we want, really. And so, anything as long as it can fit in there. But yeah, so we are going to make a science rover today, and we are going to send it to MINTZ with 4 Kerbals, 2 pilots, an engineer, and a scientist. In fact, our only 4 Kerbals. Valentina, Jeb, Bill, and Bob going to MINTZ, doing some science and scouting out the location of our eventual base. I do have extra planetary launch pads installed, and so I would like to build a MINTZ colony of sorts as a way to as a gateway to bigger and better things, bigger missions and whatnot. So we're going to start a base, not really a colony, but just, a mining operation, a building thing, habitat for Kerbals. We're going to put that on MINTZ, and yeah, that should be good. But that's going to be several episodes, many episodes of work, so this is just the preliminary aspect of it. So now I'm just trying to load it up with every science experiment that I can, anything that is going to be worth checking out on the surface. Obviously some of them won't be, because some of them are meant for high orbit or low orbit, and this is just going to be a surface science material. I do, however, forget one experiment which was part of the universal storage mod, and I always forget that experiment. It's part of like a tiny satellite, so you have to have the whole core aspect to it, and so I do forget that. So unfortunately, this rover will not be able to fully complete the mission, but it can do most of it. So I wasn't sure where I could fit a reaction wheel in there, so I decided why not put 4 of them on each of the wheels to control it. And then I set them to their own action group so I can easily toggle them on and off in flight as we need. The reason why you want reaction wheels is because, especially on a celestial body that has no atmosphere, if you ever find yourself flipped upside down or in the air losing control, you can turn on those reaction wheels and quickly align yourself to where you need to be. I'm going to throw a little capacitor on here. This is an electric-based rover. There's no liquid fuel in it in any capacity. No monopropellant, no liquid fuel. So we need to make sure that we can have electric charge and stored up batteries, and maybe even some reserve batteries would be good. So now we are getting ready to put the back on it, and now we have a rover. Well, once we get the wheels on there, we'll have a rover, but this is basically what it's going to be. Now we're just going to be adding the extra parts on top, such as the solar panel, which will allow us some sunlight generation. However, it's only directly above, so it's not the most ideal, but we did what we did with what we had. And so now I am putting this reserve battery on its own action groups, 2 of them, one to turn it on, one to turn it off. However, in hindsight, I realized that this craft is smart enough that there is a switch inside the rover that will handle the reserve power. And so I didn't need to waste those action groups, unfortunately. I was going to put just some regular low-profile lights as the headlights, but I decided to opt for these from the tracking lights mod, and that will have a tracking capability, so when the Kerbals are out and about on EVA, the lights will be able to follow them and keep them lit. So I play around. These wheels are kind of hard to deal with, not very intuitive. And I ended up, in the front, I ended up going for these rear-facing wheels, and in hindsight, I should have gone for the forward-facing wheels, so it would have been a little more stable. We don't have too many problems, but it's just a matter of better design. So I'm going to go ahead and take our 4 Kerbals and put them in different parts of the craft, and we're going to bring this out on the launch pad, or on the runway, excuse me. And we're going to test it. We're going to check all the action groups, make sure everything's good, make sure the Kerbals can get in and out, make sure the IVA works and all that. Of course, as with all of our previous episodes, we are going to be skipping all the testing. However, if testing is something you're interested in, if you want to see the whole process of building this, you know, what went wrong in between each test and why it is that we choose to add certain parts or take certain parts off. If you're interested in that sort of thing, we do provide that on our members channel. If you're interested in that, just check out the join button at the bottom of the video. But for the rest of this, we're just going to be doing our tests and then coming back and making our changes, doing our tests and coming back and making our changes. So let's go ahead and do a simulation. Everything looked great. All the action groups worked as well as they should. My tracking lights weren't set correctly, so they weren't actually tracking anybody. And I decided to copy and paste them and put them on the back as well, because why not? You know, that way our Kerbals can get light no matter where they are. I'm going to change out these cameras. I didn't like the way that they look, so I'm going to change them with these different ones. Those are all from the Hull Cams VDS, I believe is the name of that. I know the cameras that I changed them with were from the Hull Cams. I'm not sure the ones that I changed from. So I'm going to experiment for a little bit with putting actual rocket engines on here as a way to kind of do a powered landing, so I don't have to rely on any other part. I can kind of just power land. Also, it gave me the added ability that I could just do a quick little hop if I needed to, just a quick little jump up to avoid any kind of obstacle or anything. However, highly unstable, very difficult to control. We will eventually take those off, but it's going to take us a while to remember to take those off. But those aren't going to be part of the final design. So now I'm trying to figure out how to launch this. And so we are going to go ahead and bring this into the VAB, and we're going to start working on its rocketry. So my first thought was how we were going to land it is we would have this kind of like structure system with a bunch of engines all laid out evenly across the whole width of it. And then once the craft is safely to the surface, it would just pop off and disappear, allowing the craft to be there. But I couldn't figure out a good design. I was thinking about it. I couldn't think of a good design. It was just outside my wheelhouse. I didn't feel like, reinventing the wheel, trying to design something that someone else had a better design for, probably. And I just didn't want to deal with the outside research for now. But I will eventually have to learn that, because we're going to send another mission up later, and something like that will be quite helpful. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and put it in a fairing. I always like to use gold fairings anytime there's a Kerbal involved. And we are just going to make a regular rocket, and we're going to land on MINTZ like we always do. And then once we have made solid touchdown, we'll just decouple the rover from there and use our reaction wheels to right ourselves up in case we land upside down. So now we are working on our transfer and landing stage. This should get us not just from low Kerbin orbit to MINTZ, but circularizing MINTZ and landing on it as well. There's quite a lot of delta V in that stage. So let's go ahead and test this. We're gonna do a simulation around Kerbin and then just send it all the way. And as you see here, we needed twice the amount of fuel. We also need some correctional attitude correction, so RCS on here. And just touching back one more time on the testing footage on our membership channel. Oftentimes when I do test flights, I do like the entire mission. Like I took that from low Kerbin orbit, and I will take this from low Kerbin orbit all the way down to the surface of MINTZ, land safely, and try to test everything that I need to test. And so no matter where I'm going, if I'm going to the MUN, to MINTZ, if I'm going to Duna, if I'm going to any of the planets outside, it's not just like, oh, here's a little bit of extra footage. It's almost an entire episode in and of itself. So if you want more of this, you can. There's a lot more failures. You get to see a lot of more Kerbals explode. But yeah, here's our lifting vehicle. At least the one that we stick around with for a little bit, using SRBs, but I've started to find less use of them in not stock Kerbal, but just regular Kerbal, as opposed to something like RP1, because in RP1 I feel like the side booster is a little more useful. But once you unlock fuel lines, it's just might as well just use liquid fuel in asparagus stage. So I start off with some SRBs, but I will eventually switch over to liquid fuel. And so now is the matter of testing for our launch vehicle and make sure that we can get into orbit. And if we can get that upper stage into orbit, then we know we're good for the rest of it. So now we're going to go ahead and test. And like I mentioned, SRBs were nice, but not good enough. Alright, so let's go ahead and add some liquid fuel tanks. And we are going to play around with our engines. We grab one of them at first, but that's not what we end up using. And this is an awkward size of tank. We don't have a nose cone that fits very well, so we have this one that kind of hangs over a little bit. And something very, 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 very important is to auto strut, especially something as tall and unwieldy as this. And you'll see that I am auto strutting to the grandparent part. I found that I've had much better luck with that than to the root part. Sometimes the root part is pretty good until you decide to dock with something, and then once the root part changes once you dock, sometimes things can get all out of whack and funky and really difficult, and you can't fix that. You can't fix the auto strut in flight. So I just find that it's better to lean on the side of caution and just strut to the grandparent part. So regardless of where the root part is, everything is just strutted to what it's connected to instead of trying to figure out. So this is a little auto strut tip here. All right, so everything went well in that last test, so let's go ahead and throw some launch clamps on it. And so we are now getting ready to finalize our build. And we don't have a great launch profile with that rocket, so we're going to go ahead and redesign the lifting vehicle using different parts, bigger parts, and so hopefully we'll have better luck with that. So now we are going to use the large diameter of the fuel tanks. I believe that's what is that, a 3.0 or a 2.5? I think it's more than, I don't know. I don't know what the size of that is, but it's the biggest one we've got. And unfortunately, we only have the small version of it. We don't have a longer version, which means that it adds even more parts, which is not always the best thing. So let's go ahead. We're going to add an engine plate here and add 4 of these. Thankfully, they have a low profile version of it, so we're going to use those. And tilt this so those are so the engines are on the X plane, and so we can kind of separate them so they're not clipping into each other. I think they'd be fine clipping into each other, but I don't like the way that looks. I feel like it's dangerous. We're going to add another camera on here, kind of a last minute thing. And this camera is hopefully going to give us eyes when we try to line ourselves up with an anomaly or a rock, because that scanning arm needs to be within a certain distance and at a certain plane with the rock. So having this camera here will hopefully help us. However, due to glitches with the whole cam's VDS thing, sometimes cameras don't work, sometimes you can't access the camera from the IVA mode. So unfortunately, that was a camera that didn't work. So we are going to make sure that our brakes are turned up a little bit, because MINTZ is very low gravity and it's easy to skate on there. And we are finally going to get rid of the liquid fuel tanks and engines, because there's no need to carry that extra weight if we're not going to use it. And we're not going to use it because it's too hard to fly with that. Even if we were to use it for a small little jump, we would have to angle ourselves to the retrograde and cancel out whatever upwards momentum we made before coming back down. So it ended up just being more of a hassle than it's worth. So we go ahead and put a ladder here, add that. We already have a ladder from the back door, but we need one from that. And I add a docking port for no other reason except for we have a mission where if we were to land this on MINTZ, we would complete that mission. However, we needed a docking port for that. But also, we needed a lot more electric charge than we started with. So now real fast, I want to just point out the one hiccup that we had in this episode. And that is our lifting vehicle was made out of so many parts that it was very hard to fly. It was very low frame rate, and so we are going to actually get rid of the lifting vehicle and just cheat our way into orbit. But I wanted to point out that we did have enough delta V to make it to orbit. Actually, more than enough delta V to make it to orbit. Part of that would be some of our MINTZ transfer stage. So I want to pick up one last mission, and this is the primary mission for why we're going here, and this is to do a bunch of different experiments on MINTZ's flats. And that is where we want to build our base, so this is just a perfect one to pick up along the way. So now we are back. The build is done. Welcome back to anybody who skipped. Let's get ready to launch. If any of you have been missing KSP POV, well, I have good news, because today we are going to be doing the majority of this mission in the POV state, because this craft is made by ASET, and so it has huge functionality, and we can do everything that we need to do from the first person. Oh yeah, I strapped Jeb to the outside of it. He's a little unhappy that he wasn't able to ride the rocket up through the atmosphere into orbit, but he's still happy to be on the outside. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of control in his command pod right now, so he's just there for the ride. Valentina is going to be our pilot for today, taking us where we need to go. So like I mentioned, unfortunately, we're going to have to cheat into orbit because I just couldn't get a solid launch without it just being atrocious of frame rate. We managed to get to orbit with 40 tons worth of craft, so we got 40,000 funds. However, here is the rub. We would have had a much heavier craft, so we would have gotten more money. We would have probably gotten 70,000 funds if we had kept our initial launch vehicle. Also, we would have had about 200 or 300 extra Delta V if we had kept our initial launch vehicle. So, us cheating into space was actually a detriment for us. We are going to have to work harder. We're going to have less Delta V, and we get less money from the launch. So, I feel like it kind of works out there, but yeah, unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. Thankfully, using the science from this mission, we can unlock some larger tanks, which means fewer parts, and hopefully that problem won't persist. But here we are in space. Jeb takes the first look because they are still wrapped up in the fairing. Not a lot to see here because they're on the dark side of the planet. However, he can see the horizon, which is nice. He'll be able to get a glorious view of his home world soon enough. It really would have been fun to be able to have controlled the ascent from Jeb's cockpit here, just watching the sky rush up at you, but alas, we could not. So now the fairing has been deployed. It was a little hard to see because we were in the dark side, but we have now full view of the world below. So let's time warp into the sunny side and see what we can see. Yeah, from the view of this cockpit, this is just amazing. As an IVA mod, this one truly takes the cake. I was very happy with it. I've had this mod in almost every single one of my playthroughs so far. It's a staple. However, I was never able to use it because the frame rate that I had was just so bad because my computer was just so bad. It just couldn't handle a mission of this with this capsule, so I was never able to use it. So it makes me very happy to bring this to you today. And this is a great vehicle. I think a few changes, a few tweaks will be made, but we may just duplicate this and send this other places. Send this to the MINTZ, send this to Duna. It's a mobile science lab, basically. And since we're not playing with life support, it's a lot more viable. Okay, so I am going to transfer to MINTZ without using our map to plot our course. That is my goal for this craft, and we've got Bill in the engineer's seat here, and he is going to be handling the specifics of it. We're going to get Valentina to fly it, but of course he's going to be plotting and everything. We got Vessel Viewer here, which is another mod, but very, I'd feel almost like a must-have when you're doing IVA stuff. So let's go ahead and extend our one solar panel. We decided to throw on a vertical one at some point. I'm going to play around with the rotation here, but I don't end up paying very much attention to the screen, so it doesn't really matter. You don't have to worry too much about what's going on there. So we have our attitude to the left, and we have our information in the center. We can just change this. We'll change it to our camera. Why not get a nice view of the outside there? And so now we are facing anti-normal, and we are going to time warp our way to the ascending node to lower our relative inclination. Just as a quick little refresher, in order to get to the MUN, all you have to do is point in the right direction and fire. However, MINTZ is on an incline compared to Kerbin, and so what we want to do is put ourselves on the same exact incline as MINTZ, so that way when we initiate our burn, we'll be headed in the right direction. 27 seconds until our ascending node. It's not going to take very much, so we're actually going to start burning just a little close to the node. And as you see at the bottom, the relative inclination shows that it is it's actually increasing now. And that is because I was facing the wrong direction. I should have gone normal instead of anti-normal. So I'm going to go ahead and change myself around, and we're going to do that on the opposite side of the planet. However, the eagle-eyed amongst you may notice that I am holding my mouse on the time to periapsis, not the time to the descending node. I just wasn't paying attention, and so now 22 seconds from the periapsis, I'm facing anti-normal. And for some reason it works. My relative inclination is going down, and it's about to reach 0, and I have not yet noticed that I am not facing the correct direction, nor am I at the correct spot in my orbit, but yet it just works. As close, we could only get about 0.5 as close, so we ended up passing that a little bit and settled for 0.649. But that is good. We are now essentially on the same plane as MINTZ. So now it's just a matter of getting our orbit to extend far enough that we make an intercept. So let's go ahead and get on our orbital information. And since we have MINTZ targeted, it gives us stuff like the distance to it, the relative velocity, our closest approach, things like that. And we're going to use these numbers to work our way over to the correct point to burn in order to make our encounter. And what we're looking at here is the phase angle. If you look on the right-hand side of the center screen, at the very bottom of that top part in white letters, it says phase angle. We're at 216 and dropping. Once that hits 0, we're going to burn prograde, and that will extend our orbit out, and we should be able to make an intercept just through that alone. I don't know if it's a 0 phase angle for every celestial body, but I do know that in order to get to the MUN and to MINTZ, that you can simply use the phase angle and burn prograde. So anybody who's wanting to do an IVA only trip, if you want to try to land on the MUN or on MINTZ without using the map view, your phase angle will be very helpful. So now we're going to go ahead and time warp to skip forward a little bit, make things a little faster. We'll plug in our prograde heading. We're going to switch back to the IVAs of the pilots to see if we can spot anything from the front. I like switching my view around every now and then instead of just being stuck in that engineering seat, because that's essentially just like a Mach 1 capsule, you know, you're basically just looking at numbers. But we have all this glass in front of us to look at things, so sometimes you're just going to look at things. So we go ahead and get an OK from mission control to time warp to the phase angle of 0. We're going to have our reaction wheels on because, as you see here, we are starting to turn away from the prograde marker. But we also have RCS, so we're fairly maneuverable in case we need to, turn fast or anything. All right, 77 degrees on the phase angle and dropping. And now we are essentially pointed backwards to where we need to be. So at 15 degrees to the phase angle, we're just going to stop our time warp and move our way back to the prograde marker. There we go, 12 degrees. We're almost to prograde. I could have turned on RCS and moved a little faster. I don't know why I didn't. But, you live and you learn. Or you live at any rate. Alright, so now we are pointed prograde. I can't see the details on that screen from where I'm at, so we're just going to use this top screen. And Valentina is going to take control of the burn. So 8, 7, well, I guess now it's 7. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. There we go. So now all we have to do is burn in a straight line, and we should have an intercept, theoretically anyways. Jeb's having a good old time, getting to feel the rush. No wind in his hair, because obviously no space wind, but, you know, he was hoping to see the plume behind him, but unfortunately Waterfall was not providing anything to look at, so no point in looking around. And he doesn't have nearly as much information as the rest of them have, so we're going to spend more time inside the craft than outside with Jeb. But we will spend some time outside with Jeb because we are going to need it to bring him into the craft before we land, because landing on your Jeb is never a good idea. Jebs don't like that. Alright, and here we are, just extending our burn. Now we're slowing down. We can see our closest approach, and we're getting within the 1,000,000 meters. We have now made an intercept. We're gonna just kind of adjust that a little bit. We went a little too far. We're now going on the opposite side, so let's flip around to retrograde. Let's lower our thrust limit so that way we don't overburn. We get a little bit of glitching when the chatter happens. It happens sometimes. We get a few of those, but luckily they're not too intrusive and they're not too dangerous. So we comfortably and softly return to retrograde. We keep an eye on our closest approach. We just burn a little bit. We go past the 0 mark, so now we are coming in on the correct side, and we'll be ready for our intercept. Very happy with this. Very happy with how that came out, because I very well could have just burned all my fuel and wasted it, and, you know, it would either have to change the mission, come home, or, you know, just try to just do it again and do it right that time. But thankfully everything worked out. It was nice. So now we are leaving Kerbin behind, letting it disappear into the darkness, and we're watching ourselves approach MINTZ. Takes about 12 days, I think, to get to MINTZ, so crew is in for the long haul. Jeb might be regretting his decision to be strapped on the outside by the end of that day, by the end of those days, but nonetheless, we safely make it to MINTZ Sphere of Influence, and in an hour we will cross it, and we will be on our way. I get very nervous here because suddenly our intercept disappears. And I know that this is a glitch. This sometimes happens even with the regular map view, that when you get close enough, it stops counting the flyby. So instead of freaking out and changing and firing my engines one way or the other, I decide to just hold on hope, have some patience, and trust in the system. And it works. So now we're going to put our thrust limiter back to full power. It's weird to think that the thrust limiter at 100% limits 0% of the thrust, but you know, that's just how it goes. But anyways, we're not going to plot this in. We're just basically going to eyeball our capture burn. So we're pointed retrograde, everything is fine. We're at a pretty high altitude to this, but we'll be able to bring it down later. And 35 seconds to our periapsis, we ignite our engine. We have tons of thrust to weight ratio. Our thrust to weight ratio is good. We have tons of thrust, so I have no concern that we'll be able to circularize without a problem. We have plenty of delta V left, and our periapsis is at 27.5, which is nice. I like to keep somewhere below 30 when it comes to min-miss. So now all we're going to do is we are going to warp around to the periapsis and lower our orbit until it's a nice low orbit, and then we'll find a place to land. Out of the corner of our eye, we see min-miss coming up, and we just go to the dark side, far end, and at the periapsis we will circularize. The craft is slowly shifting around. I'm trying to look around, see if we can spot any part of the moon, but we cannot. Alright, and so now we are coming into retrograde. It paused for a little bit as I switched views. And 50 seconds to the periapsis. We're going to time warp our way. This isn't going to take very much to burn it all. In fact, we started much earlier than we needed to. We probably could have just burnt at 1 second or 2 seconds to the node for maximum efficiency. But doesn't matter because we are now in orbit. That went better than I expected. I'm coming in here in the map view to see my actual inclination. I will plot our landing from here because I haven't quite mastered landing, precision landing in IVA only mode. And it will take a little bit of practice before I can do it in the ASET version. I might be a little bit better off trying to do that in the low-tech analog version, either the probe control room or one of the low-tech Warbirds cockpits or anything like that, because I'm a little bit more familiar with the low-tech aspect at this point. It's been a little bit since I've done the high-tech IVA that we're doing now, so needs a little bit of practice, but that'll be for another time. So now we are going to come in. I want to land on the flats. I think that's the greater flats. I'm not sure. I can't remember which flats we need for our mission, but that is where I want to build our base. So we are going to land close to the flats, but not on it. I'd like to land in one biome, be able to do all the science there, and then travel to the biome that we're going to call home, do our science there, and then transmit everything. And so that is the goal. But I mean, first we got to make sure that we can land safely. So let's go ahead and focus on that. Back in Bill C, we are focused towards our maneuver, and now it's just a matter of time warping to it. It's a 5-second maneuver, so it should be pretty easy. And it does change our inclination, which is why it looks so weird on that map screen. We do have a little glitch again, that's why that beeped so many times, because it just did the same thing that the chatter did for some reason. So I'm going to take a look at my missions, and I see here that I did not have enough electrical charge to complete that. I was really hoping that I could complete that mission here, because all I would have to do is land, but unfortunately we do not have enough electrical charge. So we'll have to try again on that one. But that's okay because we are going to be sending an actual base here. So that's what the essence of that mission was anyway. So, you know, we were kind of cheating a little bit by making a rover, but... And there we go. The burn has been completed. Our angle has been changed. So now we are just going to pick a place, come in and land. And I don't really feel like being super efficient on this. We have plenty of delta V left. We've got like what is that, 900, 700, something like that. It's a little harder for me to see than it might be for you. Alright, so now that we've got that plotted in, we are going to go ahead and put that into remote tech so that way it can automatically handle that burn when the time comes. So we've got that set. Our craft is now rotating towards the maneuver point. And then that's when I realized we still have Jeb outside. We can't leave him out here as we land because we may end up jettisoning this lower stage, which means Jeb becomes a missile at that point. So let's go ahead and get him into the craft. Preferably before it lands, but ideally before the maneuver launches, because we are now on autopilot. That maneuver is going regardless of where we are as a Kerbal. There's no way that we're going to be able to miss it, so that means that if Jeb doesn't make it back into the capsule before the time runs out, he will be orbiting MINTZ alone. And since we don't have life support necessary, who knows how long he'll be orbiting alone. It's very important for you to get back, Jeb. Unfortunately, I did not have my keys mapped the correct way. I like to change the default RCS controls because it doesn't work very well in IVA mode. Unfortunately, I did not change those before this episode. I changed it before the next episode, but as far as right now goes, I'm having difficulty controlling, and I suddenly lost sight of the craft, and I started to freak. But we're not going to quit. We're going to figure this out. So I go into the map view, and I try to target the craft. I figure maybe if I can target, then I can point myself towards the target, and that'll give me an idea of where I need to go. But no matter what I do, it wasn't allowing me to click on it. I think I was just too close. So I was not able to make it a target. But thankfully, when we came back in, I spotted something. And we had actually just passed by the ship itself. So if I turn slightly, Jeb can see it. Well, there you go, Jeb. You have limited control. I'd like to do this all in IVA mode, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to move forward or backwards, up or down, or anything like that in IVA mode. I can rotate my view, but that was about it. So we're going to try to glide back in the only way that we can, because honestly, I don't want to kill Jeb. That would put a sour turn on this whole mission for everybody, Jeb included. All right, so we're approaching fairly quickly, so we need to make sure that we can kill our momentum, so we don't just slam into it and then ricochet off like that. Now, unfortunately, the craft is at an angle. And if I had the correct keys set up, I could handle this angle easily. But I have to go to the. You have to go to the main menu in order to change the translation keys. And so I couldn't be bothered at the time. I just wanted to get Jeb back in as soon as possible. And unfortunately, anytime I try to orientate myself, it just flips me around, so proving much more difficult than I had anticipated. But we're almost there. We're kind of lined up, and just a little bit closer, and Jeb can board. And there you go. Jeb is now safely in his seat, but he's in the back of the craft, so he's gonna pop out of here using the free IVA mod, which allows you to float around your craft and head down the hallway into the main cockpit. And he's got a seat waiting for him right in the middle there. So everyone's happy, everyone's glad that he made it in safe, and everyone's looking forward to touching down on MINTZ. If you're a longtime viewer of our channel, or maybe you're just joining, you will now find out that if you hear this song, that means something's afoot, and danger is around every corner, and there's no guarantee that we will land safely. So we're killing our nodes, so that way we can turn towards the target and point retrograde. We are basically just going to try to kill all of our horizontal velocity and go forward. We're going to time lapse forward, and then Remote Tech takes control of our maneuver. the computer starts freaking out a little bit, and I'm worried, but thankfully it didn't adjust our burn in any way. So we're still set on course to come down where we wanted to come down. So let's kill remote tech. We don't need this anymore. We're going to get rid of that and fly the rest of the way by hand. Point ourselves retrograde and get ready for the descent. So we're going to use our RCS to move ourselves a little more quickly. We're going to be ditching the RCS as soon as we land anyway, so we might as well make some use out of it. We came with quite a lot because I was assuming we would need it a lot more than we did, but might as well use it, right? So we're going to utilize our RCS to keep our attitude correct. So now it's just a matter of bringing up the right information where we want it. I definitely want a camera pointed towards the surface so I can visually see where I'm at and what I'm coming down upon. But I also want this screen on the right, which tells me the estimated time to impact, those orange numbers at the top center. It gives us our relative altitude as well as our descent speed. Currently is negative 15 meters per second. 16.8.9. There you go. So that's where that number is. Our horizontal velocity is 11.9. Our vertical velocity is negative 16. So we are actually going forward slightly. We're not just coming straight up and down. But I will not know this for quite some time. Time warping a little closer to the surface. We're now 10 kilometers above. Down, about a minute and a half left of impact. And also, if you're familiar with this game, you may already know where I'm going wrong right now. We'll see if you can spot it. All right, you give up? We're pointed towards orbital speed mode as opposed to surface. So it looks like we're going straight up and down, but we are coming in at an angle, and that's why my visual description does not match up with what I'm assuming is going on outside the craft. So I burned a little too much, and now I'm actually headed back up on an ascent. Slowly flipping back over, we'll reach our apoapsis soon enough. We're going to crank on the RCS, point ourselves back so our retrograde is pointed towards the surface. And I have still yet to change the surface mode. It's the thing that's right below the retrograde marker and the maneuver point marker. Lower left-hand corner, it says orbit. It should say surface. So now we are essentially hovering. We're coming down into a descent once more. We're at 3 meters per second of an ascension. And now we have passed our apoapsis, so we are pointed down once again. So I use my SAS, point myself retrograde, and that will be enough to land from if we were on surface mode. I'm sorry I keep bringing it up. It's just I didn't realize until the very last second when I was actually playing this. And so when I'm editing this, I'm just looking at myself like, you idiot. You just need to click it. You could have done so much better if you just clicked that knob. We get a little bit of a freeze there, which is never a good sign when you freeze before landing. Let's go ahead and just kind of tilt ourselves retrograde. Once again, we are now coming in at an angle. That is because the craft is desperately trying to match its orbital speed while heading straight down, so it's very confused. thankfully we have our RCS to help control our descent. So now you can see on the screen, we now see our shadow, which means that we are close. We're only 90 meters above the surface, and we can very easily see that we are heading in sideways, very quickly sideways too. So I try to adjust that before we made touchdown, and that's when I noticed we were in orbital mode instead of surface. So I'm only 200 meters above the surface right now. Things can go very wrong very quickly, and I am not entirely confident that I will be able to recover, but thankfully we are moving slow enough. And now that I am pointed towards surface retrograde, we can better control our descent. And this entire time I had yet to quick save. I just did it right there when I turned the HUD back on. That was the first time that I've quick saved since Jeb got into the capsule. I didn't even quick save before taking him out, so that entire time was very risky. Yeah, that was my first quick save among the descent. Thankfully I got it in right before the lowest amount. And now 80 meters above the surface, we're only going 0 meters per second now. We just hovered there for a second because we have a very large thrust to weight ratio. I guess not very large, it's a little over 1, but so now we're just gonna throw on a little bit of throttle to gently slow our descent. Make sure that we come down at close to 0 meters per second as possible. 10 meters above the surface, and we basically hover for a second as we froze up, which is again always concerning because when you freeze up right before touchdown, sometimes that means explosions. There we go. We've made contact. We pop up a little bit, but then land right back down on our engine bell. And we have successfully landed on MINTZ. Except we haven't yet, because we need to put our wheels down. And currently, we are standing on top of a very tall, very precarious tower. And if we fall down with too much force, there is a chance that we can explode. So let's use our RCS. Let's tilt one direction and then rotate ourselves so that way we land upright. We do clip through a rock a little bit, which is weird because I do have collisions on, and so I was assuming that this rock would be one that would have collision. However, we seem to just phase right through it. So I'm not complaining, but I do feel like we shouldn't have had it that easy. But everyone's happy that we did, so that's all that matters. Kerbals are happy, the Kerbals are alive. They're ready to do some exploration, and they're ready to do some science. So we switch our craft into driving mode, and we're going to stage our final stage, which gets us decoupled from the rocket. And we're just going to leave it there. Maybe we'll utilize it for fuel at some point, somehow, some way, somewhere else. But for now, we are just going to leave that debris behind and start driving. So first, let's put on our brakes, and let's do some science. So first, we're going to open our bay doors. And we're going to activate our science. We're going to activate our ground science. We don't have any scanning tech, but this will get us as much science as we can for the time being. A lot of it is stuff that needs to be recovered back home. However, we are going to send a return craft for these Kerbals. They're not going to be left here on MINTZ indefinitely, so they'll be able to collect all that science and transfer it in to the capsule that brings them home. Got a nice view of the rocks on MINTZ, and Bob gets out of his seat, scooches his way around the rest of them, leans over Bill's console so he can turn on the ladder, because nobody turned on the ladder for him. He would just have to fall down. And he's going to go ahead and get into the back and do some science. He is so excited. When he saw this rover for the first time, he knew that it had his name written all over it. This is a science rover. Let's go ahead and open the hatch, get out, place the first boots on MINTZ. Gorgeous. It's definitely not made of mint ice cream. A little disappointed by that. Let's go. He will have the honor of planting the first flag, as well as taking some surface samples and EVA report. Once again, unfortunately, I did forget to change the mission flag, so we planted the Kerbin flag on MINTZ as opposed to the MINTZ flag on MINTZ, but we will be planting another flag whenever we land at our eventual base location, and that will be the correct flag. Once again, those flags are from a mod that I put together named Minimalist Flags for Every Body. You can find it on CCAN, and it's just a flag pack, so it's compatible with, I think, everything. Oop. Bob finds the low gravity on MINTZ a little difficult to deal with, but thankfully he's got plenty of RCS. And he's already done all the science. He has already collected all that. So all he's really wanting to do is pose for a picture, so that way everyone can see back home just how happy he is with this technology. So let's restore our mystery goo, and our materials-based science is on the other side. So we're gonna just do a little RCS hop and get our way over there. In the next episode, I do end up changing the controls, so we will, from that point on, we will be able to do IVAs or EVAs in IVA mode, first-person mode, through the eyes of the Kerbal. I'm very excited about that. It's actually, I've just found it so much easier to move around with RCS in first-person mode. It's like night and day difference of how easy it is to control once you get the controls remapped. I don't do very well with the JK, IL, HN keys. My hands are too close onto the keyboards, so I like to use my number pad. So I use the 4, the 6, the 8, the 2, the plus, and the enter. And then that moves me forward, backwards, left and right, and up and down in vertical space. And so I can have my hands spread out a little bit more. And if there's ever a question of which way I need to point, there are literally arrow keys printed on the key. So if I want to move forward, press the 8 key, because that has the arrow forward. Very simple. I highly recommend anybody playing in IVA mode with Through the Eyes of the Kerbal to change around their key bindings. So you can see right there, that's the tracking lights. You see how I have a nice little spotlight on me as I go around. That's from the tracking lights mod. Highly recommend. Very useful. I kind of put them on almost all my landers because there's never a situation where having more light is a bad thing. Okay, there might be situations where having more light might be a bad thing, but when it comes to most missions, it just it helps. So let's get Bob back in his seat. He's in the seat that has the least amount of control and least... Hi, guys. You decided to coordinate your smiling. I actually didn't notice that this whole time. I never noticed the fact that they bobbed their heads and smiled in unison right there. That's fun. But yeah, he's got the least amount of control. There's nothing that he can actually fiddle with or touch. There's no control panels because his stuff is on the outside. That's why Bill gets to have all the fun doing the actual engineer controls of the craft. I like that extraplanetary launch pads gives a lot more use to engineers, because I feel in the base game engineers are a little bit useless. If you're not playing with any kind of mod that adds part failures or repair kits or things like that, if you're not, using extraplanetary launch pads and using engineers to build things, they don't have much of a use. And so I felt like Bill was highly underutilized in most of my playthroughs. So I'm glad to give him a job on this rover. Alright, so now it is going to come time to drive. We have a long way to go and a large hill to come down. We're closer to that little flat over there on the left, but that's not the flat I want to go to. I want to go to the one to the east of us. So thankfully we have a compass on our window screen, and that's part of the IVA mod, the RS IVA mod. So let's go ahead and check out our contracts. Unfortunately, we weren't able to build a new surface, and we didn't actually complete any contracts so far, so we have yet to make any sort of money from that. But we did achieve landing a rover on MINTZ with 4 Kerbals, so that's fun. That's just, you know, for us. But now, once we go to the flats, then we'll be able to do the science, and then that will take care of the mission. So let's go ahead and turn our brakes off, turn our reaction wheel off, and start driving. We're going to point ourselves east. And then pick up some speed. So now, I just want to remind you all, remember when I said that we are playing with collisions, parallax collisions, and that means that it gives the scatter on the ground some actual weight to it. You can't just phase through all these different rocks that are in our way. So this is a very long, very treacherous, very slow drive, and we are going to have to figure out a better way to do it, because we are not going to be able to make it to the flats in any short amount of time this way. So in the next episode, we'll focus on completing a mission to give us a little bit more science and more money, and then we will send another craft down here to finalize this mission and get our Kerbals to where they need to go. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KXP. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.